It's Martine. It's French. I am not, but the name is. There you go.
Okay.
It's my middle name.
Oh, it's your middle name. Much like Lewis is my middle name because my last name no one can pronounce.
Well, my real last name is Hubbard, and it's not a romance name. There's no romance novelist writing with Hubbard and doing very well.
That works.
It's the whole old mother. Nobody wants that. Old Mother Hubbard.
I've got a cousin who writes romance.
Is she Hubbard?
No, her last name's Zellers, actually.
That's fine.
We're talking about bones, and we're talking romance. Welcome to the show. So, when we talk about romance novels, I'm going to get into the burning question of the week. If you've watched the show, I ask everybody a different question each week. Do you believe in ghosts? I do.
At least the Holy Ghost. That's what hand on Bible. That's what I got to say.
We'll get to the Bible later. Now, you're a romance novelist. That's what we're promoting here today. Now, I've got a dumb question. When I was younger, I read some Harlequin romances, and we're going to get right down to the meat of it more than anything else.
Okay.
Anywhere in your book, does it say his pulsing member?
No, sorry. Was that like a bingo question I already lost?
Well, no, because almost all of the old Harlequin romances where they're like in a moonlit glade, the ones that I read anyway, and there's trees all around them. Like three. Okay. I was a young dude wondering how women worked, and apparently Harlequin romance wasn't the way to go. But it would always end up in a secluded place that was very romantic, and always those three words, his pulsing member gleamed in the moonlight or whatever.
Well, I tell you the truth. I know that there are romance handbooks on how to write a romance novel. I haven't read any of them, so I'm probably doing it all wrong as far as hitting all these punchlines. My sister looked at the cover and said, well, that's nice, but there needs to be more Fabio, and there's no bodice ripping, and she said it doesn't count without at least one of those, or heaving bosoms, and there are not a lot of heaving anything.
That was the other one. It was her heaving bosoms glistened as she touched his pulsing. This has been demonetized.
Sorry.
It's okay. So I do apologize for getting way overly sexual in this.
That's okay. I wrote a romance novel. I have to expect it. I'm kind of used to it at this point, and some people are happy. They ask that kind of thing, and one of my friends recently read it, and she wrote the review saying something along the lines of, "It's racy enough that I'm not going to lend it to my mom, but still ladylike," which I thought was very funny. Considering I've had older ladies read it and still seem to like it, and none of them have tried to pray for my immortal soul just yet, so I must not have crossed that line too hard.
Let them pray. Speaking about writing.
Yes.
Now, you told me before the show what your inspiration for this book was, and I want you to share it if you're allowed to.
I am.
If you want, with why you wrote the book. And then we're going to get into being a bit snobbish, but we'll start here first.
So long as you're the one leading the snob parade, I'm fine. So the joke was, I wrote a completely different book, took a couple years, and then I was doing what's called a beta swap, where you take your book and you swap it with someone else, try to give each other feedback, polish it, make sure it's perfect, make any improvements. And I read someone else's book in a different genre that I don't normally read, I definitely don't write, but I'm not all that familiar with. And I was just so frustrated with it. If it weren't for the fact that I was reading it on my phone, I would have thrown it across the room. But I like my phone, so I didn't throw it. But it was very frustrating. It was one of those things where women were portrayed terribly. The main character was a gold digger, sitting there literally looking at like cup and noodle and deciding whether or not she wanted to go out with a man who she'd already rejected his marriage proposal and didn't like how he treated her, but she was considering going out with him because he would take her to a nice restaurant and get a steak dinner. So it was either horrible man and steak dinner, instant noodle. That's just not the kind of person or main character I can relate to as a reader. So after I read that, I was just frustrated and thought, this genre can be better. There's no reason it shouldn't be better. And I can still enjoy a romantic story, and I've read other stories with romance in them. There's no reason this can't be done. So I kind of just took a stab at it myself. And when I was done, I sent it to one of my friends who does enjoy romance, because I said, I don't even know if I'm doing this right. I don't know what a romance book needs to have. and she read it in a day. She was mad when her Kindle died halfway through and had to recharge the thing, and then demanded a sequel. So I wrote her that too, but we're not onto the sequel yet.
So here's my big thing about writers. I believe that if you're going to put something out there, it should have something valuable for culture. Personally, that's my own personal belief. As an artist, if it's completely useless to everyone, then it's completely useless. Yeah, we can make metaphors and stuff like that. But the book you just described with basically the gold digger going for steak or going for noodles, to me, that represents almost institutionalized stupidity on the media directed towards women. You know, men go through this Homer Simpson thing where when you look like me, you're supposed to act like Homer Simpson and be a complete moron. Women have it happen in romance. They do. You're supposed to be a simpering princess that's too stupid to tie her own shoes. And I find that, sorry for lack of a better term, but it's effing offensive. Because
it's insulting. It's offensive.
I'm not a woman, but women are extremely smart, just like men are. And the fact that some people write like that, and don't get me wrong, there are those people out there that would choose between the two. How does it make you feel as a woman when you see that type of thing in literature?
Well, it's frustrating, especially when the person writing it is a woman. I've seen it show up a lot on Twitter. There's like a tag of men writing women, and the idea that, well, men can't write women characters. Men write great women characters, and a lot of my favorite authors are men and have written wonderful female characters. I'm a huge Expanse fan, and I love the characters in The Expanse. Naomi Nagata is an amazing character and written by two men. So I don't think it's impossible, and I don't think it's even that hard. And generally, when I've come across poorly written female characters, it's by other women. And this was not the only book that I found this in. It was not the only book I've baited where I found a woman where I couldn't relate to it. One of them, I said to someone, and this wasn't even in a romance, this was in a thriller. I said, I'm having a hard time connecting with your main character, and I'm not really sure what you can do to change it, because the things you're doing, like an early scene had her having internal thoughts about how her friend needed to lose weight. And it wasn't even conveyed or even put on maybe if she was more active, she'd be more healthy type thing. But we were putting body dysmorphia on another character. And I asked, why are you doing this? What is the goal? And she said, well, I kind of wanted the reader to be a little jealous of her. And I thought, no, you can't connect with a character that you're jealous of. And that doesn't establish someone you want to root for. And I thought maybe she's going to turn it around, and maybe it's going to come around and we're going to have a change of heart and someone who has growth, because everyone wants the hero's journey, in every genre that's going to look a little different, but we want growth. There was no growth. So most of the terrible characters that I've seen as far as women go, I can't even put them off on men. It's being written by men and women alike. It's in various genres, but I would hate to write any kind of character that doesn't at least have some kind of redeeming value somewhere along the line. Even the antagonists. I don't write super villainous characters that are just mean for the sake of being mean. They still have motives and intentions, because that's what real people do. Nobody runs around just twiddling mustaches going, I want to hurt people. Well, maybe some do, but nobody in my books anyway.
There's only one or two that I know of.
Maybe there are a couple. That is.
So that bothers the hell out of me that somebody would even write that, because you're right. People do need to have that journey. It's throughout literature. Go all the way back in time. The story has been used as a metaphor, and it doesn't matter what story. It's been used as a metaphor to move people along their path, either to redemption or some of them epic failure. But if you look back in mythology and stuff like that, usually it's about. We know those stories aren't real. There was no real Hercules. Nobody was moving rivers and all that crap or fighting lions. And if they were, good for them. But it's a story of redemption and getting back to his parentage. And all stories are like that. They follow that same journey. To not have growth within a book is a sad state. Maybe that speaks back to the person not having growth themselves.
And it might, and I don't know, I do a lot of beta reading for friends, but I've also been part of the writing community enough to meet other authors who are struggling to get published. And so some of these people already are published and some are still on that journey themselves. So I don't know. I know I kind of joke that I haven't yet to write a main character that isn't just me in a wig, because that's how I get inside a character's mind, is using my own thoughts and my own processes and my own way of relating to things. And it also just helps if I can just steal chunks of my life as far as backstory. My sister sent me a section from Dibs, and I told her nobody else is going to be laughing at that section but you and I, because we were there when it happened.
Yeah.
I was making fun of my grandparents. They passed away. They don't know.
It's okay. They'd probably be okay with it. You have the highest viewership I've ever had, by the way, just so you know.
I do?
Real viewership.
I can't see anything. I can't see anything to say
11 people.
who's here. Oh, 11. Yeah. This one goes.
Well, no, it's good. We've had 4 thumbs up and a thing. People share it, please. Allison, where does your writing actually come from? Because you told me that you've done several books about different things. For instance, science fiction, and you told me a little bit about fantasy, science fiction, stuff like that. Where do they actually come from? And we'll talk about the style that you use as well. But where do they come from? Where do these characters live?
Well, most of them just kind of hang up out here, and then they show up on page. I mean, it's not a good answer, but mostly when it comes to my characters, they are people drawn from my life and my backstory and family and friends, and I always rename them and usually give them something to kind of distinguish them from actual people so no one gets their feelings hurt. Sometimes I am inspired by someone in real life, or a character or an actor or something. I spend way too much time on Pinterest looking at people, and when I'm sad, that kind of perks me up. But as far as the actual stories themselves, it's kind of different each story. I like the running joke with Dibs is that this one arrived fully formed. So you see, it's not that big, but this arrived fully formed in my head, and I couldn't type fast enough to get it down. So any typos that ever showed up were simply because it was up there, and when it came out, I had the beginning, middle, and end, and pretty much every scene with characters as if I was watching a movie in my head. And I don't really know where it came from, but it just kind of showed up. Whereas the book that you and I were talking about earlier, which is literary science fiction, that one started with just the tiniest spark of an idea, with the concept of a sleep-deprived new mom who is having visions in her child's nursery. And she doesn't know if it's the product of losing her mind because she is so sleep-deprived after a year plus of completely interrupted sleep, or if reality is actually just tearing around her. And that's all I had. And as I moved forward, I kept expanding it. And as things would happen, the story took off in completely unexpected ways that I didn't see coming. So if you would have shown me how that book, The Garibaldi Waltz, if you would have shown me where that ended up, I would have been completely surprised. I would have been surprised who ends up in that book and who isn't in that book. And the journey that character goes on was something that I went on with her, because it didn't arrive fully formed. I know Jack earlier was talking about being a pantser. He and I are proud pantsers together, and that was a complete just moving through it, which also meant that was one where I was stuck for a while going, I can see the ending. There's something between me and the ending, and I don't know how to get through it. And I ended up going back, rereading it, and then finally I saw the way forward. But that was a very different process from Dibs, because Dibs just arrived as like a package, and it was just a matter of shoving it on the screen.
Awesome. I really like what you talk about with your science fiction that you're writing, because you told me before it related back to biology before the actual interview started happening. By the way, if people want to make comments, if you signed up for StreamYard, or you go to StreamYard and hit allow, and you'll actually be able to ask Allison questions. I'll see it over on the side here. So when you do your characters come to life for you like they do for some authors? It's almost like they stop you from doing certain things with them.
They do, especially if they go in a place where I didn't expect it to happen. Like I said, Dibs kind of arrived fully formed, so that one was just a matter of putting it down. And then when I had reader feedback telling me, we want a sequel, and I said, okay, well, I wasn't planning on a sequel. I can do a sequel. I originally planned to take a secondary character and move them as my main character, and leave the two main characters, which in Dibs are Adam and Olivia, and have them be secondary characters. That's not what my readers wanted, but I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and do it. As soon as I started trying to write, they wouldn't let me. They're like, our story's not over. We have a lot more to say. And yes, I know this ends with the happily ever after, but they weren't ready to kind of take the back seat yet. And so their story went in ways I didn't expect. And each scene was even a surprise to me when I realized certain things, certain backstories of other characters that I didn't know until I started writing it. And I was surprised, and I said, oh, I did not see that coming, but that's good because I didn't really know what the tension or the big conflict was going to be, because the characters start out in the second book, they start out together, spoiler alert, but they do. And I didn't want to do a thing where people were really worried about them together, because I thought that would be fake. I wanted people to feel confident enough in them that that wasn't where the story was going to go. So other things arose, and other people showed up and decided to throw monkey wrenches into the works. And that's how that story went. But that was definitely way more pantsing again, but letting the story, well, the characters were wearing the pants that time, not even me.
I find it interesting because with what I do, I have to let my characters take over, but my characters are real people. I do stage hypnosis, right? And it's guiding them and guiding them to the finish that I want. When you write, you're obviously fairly well educated from what I talked to you about before, and literary writing versus like non-literary writing.
That's not the kind of writing I was trained in, though.
What writing were you trained in?
Legal writing. I'm an attorney. Sorry. Throw in the lawyer jokes. It's fair.
No.
I had to unlearn everything that I knew about proper. I took creative writing courses in college and then got to law school, and they said, remove all of those. You need to be more straightforward, or the judge will stop reading. So I learned how to write briefs, and that's a very, very different style. So getting to write creatively again just lets everything out and be a lot more free, because no one's going to be redlining through it and saying, okay, striking all of this. Watch the partners just strike out half of what I wrote. I'm like, that was a beautiful sentence. Okay, bye.
Jennifer, you're not allowed to flirt while I'm doing my interviews. Jennifer says a hot attorney.
Thank you, Ben. Jennifer is my sister wife, and she's paid to say this.
I'm not going there.
Sorry.
I'm not going there. I had Jennifer on a while back, and she was a hell of an interview. So you've got me distracted. When you got 3 kids, and you told me you had 3 earlier.
I do.
How do they play into how you write? Do they ever make appearances? Do the little weird things that they do happen in your books?
So both Dibs and Since September take place in a stage of life prior to having kids. So they're not in that at all. But the Garibaldi Waltz, the main character is a mom, and there's only one child in it. And when I started writing it, I only had the one child, and it took several years to write it. I think the spark of the idea came when I only had one, but by the time I started writing it, I actually had 3. So when I recently told them that the child in it she has the same nickname as my daughter. My daughter is Fiona, but we call her, when she was little, when she had these big cheeks, we called her Jub Jub. So she was Jub Jub, and Jub Jub is in the book. And when I told my kids that, my middle daughter freaked out. She was like, not fair, I want to be in your book. I eventually added a little scene at the end, so now she's in the book too, because she was really upset. Not that I think a 7-year-old is going to be reading 130,000 word literary science fiction book anytime soon, but my children all have very high Lexiles. I really wouldn't put anything past them.
That's awesome. I like it.
My 9-year-old wanted to know if Dibs would be in her school library.
Let's hope not, right? I'm sure.
My mother was a librarian, and she for an elementary school, and she was the one who would always make sure that those questionable books, she would hide them under her desk, so students would have to actually ask for them. So my mom was kind of big on the censorship when it comes to that Harry Potter book. I'm not sure that's appropriate. I'm going to keep it back here, and if someone asked for it, they could have it, but she wouldn't just put it out there. But yeah, the idea of an adult romance book and even my children's elementary school library is kind of
that would be weird.
Frightening.
Well, you never know what could happen. What other cool things would you like to talk about? I've learned a lot about you. Are you a weirdo in any other ways other than being an author? Tell me about yourself, and tell the viewers about yourself.
I'm not sure there's anything about me that isn't weird in some way. And whenever I see definitions of normal in anything, I go, well, I probably don't fit in that whatsoever. That's okay. I mean, I was always the nerdy kid growing up. I was the band geek. And I know one of my friends who read the book, she was in color guard, and we knew each other through that when I was in high school. And she commented on Dibs saying something about, oh, I could see things from even back then. And I'm trying to think, what did I put in there that
what is color guard?
I have no idea. Oh, color guard. Those are the tall flags, the ones who can, well, they have coordination, which I don't. Hand-eye coordination. I don't have any of that. And
tall
ability. You know,
you've got me baffled.
Okay.
I have no idea
so
what
imagine either a marching band on the field or a parade, right?
Okay.
And the flags, they spin the flags. They also, some of them do rifles. I mean, they're wooden rifles. They're not actual guns. And this was one of my friends who I knew through that, because the band, we'd hang out with the drill team and the color guard, and we would all travel everywhere together. And the drill team and the color guard always got the cute guys. And those of us in band were just kind of, we get whatever's left.
But they were the freakiest. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. So where do people find your books?
Jesse's just like, please just look at the links, distracting me now. So Dibs is available now on Amazon. It's really easy to find because you just type in Dibs. Like there's a screenshot I took that cracked me up because it often shows up right next to those ice cream Dibs, like the Nestle ice cream Dibs.
Oh.
It's a perfect two for get your ice cream and read the book. But just look for the bourbon on the cover so you can find that there. So that's the easiest way to get it. And I think it's still, I know it's on Kindle. I think it's still on Kindle Unlimited. So if you've got that deal, you can download it for free and read it that way. So that's the only one that's out so far because my agent has my literary sci-fi, and that one, it's going to take time for them to find the right publisher. So crossing my fingers, it finds a good home, and I'll be able to talk about that when I know where it's going.
Well, I'll have you back on for that for sure. But my question is, in today's world, why did you choose to go with a small publisher, breaking rules, for one book and then a traditional route for the other?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. And the first thing was, I think I mentioned, I wrote the sequel to Dibs and pretty much immediately after I finished. There was maybe a week between them. And the books were coming so fast that the idea of waiting for the traditional publishing route literally paralyzed me, because I thought, okay, I have 2 books here. Even if an agent takes them right away, shops them right away, what if they want changes? What if they don't want the second one to go the direction I took it in? And then I'm stuck with a book that no one will publish because they wanted me to take it another direction. And all those decisions take months. Even quick agents, it's just a really slow process. Yeah. The smaller publishing houses have the freedom and flexibility to go ahead and move forward with things. And they also usually give a lot more creative freedom. I know you mentioned Jen. She and I both were talking about this, and that's part of the reason she went with smaller, because she wanted to have the freedom to keep the book the way she wanted it, didn't have to make changes to how the characters acted or behaved. So it was really more a true voice to what her artistic representation of the book was. And that was really true for me too. The idea of having to wait and find out, okay, well, we'd like the sequel, but it really shouldn't be about Adam and Olivia anymore. Or, okay, the third book, now we want them to be house hunting and they don't want me to walk away from it. I wanted to have full control over where the story goes and to be true to that. On the other hand, Garibaldi Waltz is a standalone book. And if it takes a longer time for it to get out there and it can kind of sit on the back burner while it's going through those hoops and finding its right home, I'm okay with that, because whatever else I write in that genre is going to be separate from it. And I'm not being held back by that process. I'm able to move forward. And a big thing with that also is I hope that one finds a big audience. It appeals to men and women. And I hope that the publisher, if it's a bigger publisher, can get it in front of more eyes than a smaller publisher, an independent publisher, is able to do. Like, a smaller publisher doesn't have the ability to put up a billboard or a bus stop or buy out all these Facebook ads and do all that. The promotion is completely on the author, and also on authors networking and just supporting each other, which I've had
doing this
from other authors. Doing things like this, doing things like having cross-promotional events where I talk about my book while Jen talks about her book, and we share audiences, because our books are very different, but it's going to appeal to some of the same people who like some of the same things. And that's been great. But I think that both of them have found the right places for them to be, because if I was sitting here waiting to find out, okay, will this book get to print, I would not feel free to move forward with the next or the book after that. And I've been kind of playing with the third book. The third book is going to feature a secondary character and her moving forward. And I wouldn't feel I could do that if I was still waiting to hear if the first one was going to find a publisher, if that makes any kind of sense. So each one kind of found the home that made them the most successful for what they are. And I also know for something like romance, I had a friend tell me, and I will keep her name out of this because she probably doesn't want anyone to even know she reads romance, but she does, because she only reads it on her Kindle, so her kids never see that she's reading it. And those independent books on Kindle do just fine because it doesn't look any different, it doesn't feel any different. And my physical book it feels just like any other book that would have come out from a giant publisher versus a smaller publisher. But since most of the people who are going to be reading this, more of them, unless they know me and are like, I need you to sign it, most of them are going to prefer the digital because that's how they prefer to read. So having it available that way and having it on Kindle Unlimited has been really a great thing, so people can download it and support myself and a lot of other independent authors that way, because if they've got Kindle Unlimited, they can read as many as they want. And then they've got to prove themselves in the pages, because if they don't keep reading, then the author doesn't get paid. I don't know if everyone knows how Kindle Unlimited works. I certainly didn't, but the authors get revenue based on how much of the book is actually completed, not just if they download it. So if you go to download your friend's book on Kindle Unlimited and then you never read it, they're not getting anything from it. So if you buy it on Kindle, that's different. But if you're just downloading it for Kindle Unlimited, it's based on how many pages go through. So I talked to another author who was disappointed because no one ever clicked off the title page. Does that make sense?
So read people's books. That's the big thing here. If you get a book on Kindle Unlimited, don't screw the author over. Go to the last page and make sure you read the damn thing. I find that journey interesting. The choice between traditional versus, well, I don't know what it would be. Breaking Rules isn't a traditional publisher, right? But it's not a tiny publisher either, if that makes sense. Christopher told me they have 100 authors. You are part of Breaking Rules, right?
Yes.
Okay. So to be honest with that, what he talked about getting 15 authors together and creating a group and doing the media appearances like this. And I agree with that. And that's a heck of a system. And I think it can go a long, long way. What I would suggest, though, is having a specific Facebook group with everyone in it, which I think I was invited to, that everyone shares everything. Just to push it out there, right? 15 people can get, I know how many people 15 people can get because you guys have been doing it. And I watch my views. I'm getting about 3,000 minutes of view time every time I have a breaking rules person come on. And that's every day. So, and I see it getting distributed about 380 people as well. So I think that while the traditional way, I don't think is the way to go for authors anymore. I'm not sure that I would ever publish a book that way, simply because I don't think that they're going to help you as much as you might think they are. Yeah, they might be able to buy a book. I think it's going to
depend. Right. No, yeah. But what also depends is also how the deal works behind the scenes. So some of the things that are going to vary is, so with Breaking Rules, my contract indicates a split between myself and the publisher. And it changes based on how many books you sell. But I didn't get, when I completed the book, I wasn't given a royalty check to say, here you go, good job.
Book deal,
right. And that makes a big difference, because for some people, that the difference between getting an advance versus just getting royalties is the difference between whether or not they can pay rent. So having a big publisher be able to give you a royalty check ahead of time as your advance also says, I have confidence in you, I have confidence in this work, and I have confidence this is going to sell. A smaller publisher, they take less risk because they aren't doing big batch and they're not doing the big promotions and doing that. But I that was one of the reasons, though, that I was not scared about going with a smaller publisher, because I was joking that when I was seeing things, I'm on all the email lists from the publishers that put out books that I like. Most of what I was seeing was them promote authors I already knew about. Like, did any of us really need an email telling us that Stephen King had a new book? I think we all knew about Stephen King. I think we all would have found his book. I don't think he needed the big push.
But therein lies the rub. Therein lies the rub, because he sells 1 million books every time he comes out, or whatever the number is. And Jesse Lewis sells 7 when he comes out, and that's all he can sell, right? So but that's it, right? So why would a big publisher take a big risk? You know, it's very huge risk.
So it is their risk, and that's why they only take a very few, which is why getting an agent is so hard and why it is kind of that stamp of approval. And this is something that we see on, if you go on Twitter and search writing community, you'll have about 100 authors at any given time bemoaning the fact that they think they're horrible, that they have no confidence, and it's because they probably got one bad review or one beta who was a little mean, and the 100 other ones that were positive and telling them they were amazing just got drowned out. Because I know that's how it works for me. Like, you can show me all the good reviews I get. I'm going to focus on the one that said something snarky or something that hurt my feelings or whatever. And yes, I know I need thicker skin, but I'm not a lizard. I don't have thick skin. I am who I am.
It's like if somebody called your baby ugly. It's the same thing. Your children are ugly.
My kids are really cute. That's actually one thing I've never had. Mostly people are looking at my kids going, how did you have such cute kids? I'm like, I really don't. Recessive genes? I got nothing. They all got my husband's eyes, so they all have blue eyes, and they look at me and go, are you sure you're their mother? I'm like, they look like me, but with blue eyes. I don't know what to tell you. But yes, having that stamp of approval from a publisher, from an agent, is something that a lot of authors, they crave, because it's that outside verification, besides their friends and family, that what they wrote has value. So I could have 100 friends and family tell me, I love what you wrote, and I take that and I go, oh, that's great. But until it's somebody who doesn't know me, who's just looking at the words and isn't connecting, like my main character, a lot of people are like, oh, I see you in it. I'm like, well, I think you should, because that's who I'm writing from. But people who don't know me and can't read in any of my own personality and are just seeing the words on the page and that's it, and then they're telling me that they liked it, and then they're telling me they were able to connect with that character, that is something that is the stamp of approval, that you go, okay, my words are actually connecting to someone, and it's not that prior relationship, if that makes sense. And yes, having that publisher stand behind you do that. So you're right. They don't have that risk when they're pushing the Stephen King book. They just letting people know to come and sign up and throw their money at it and go, yes, please give me my next book. And I'm probably going to read it too. I probably wouldn't buy it because I'm limited, and I try to buy independent authors and debut authors when I can. But I do read his books because I do enjoy them. And he wouldn't be successful if he didn't write a great book 9 times out of 10. So when a publisher stands behind a new author or a relatively untested author and says, I believe in as much in this new author as I do in Stephen King or in Dean Koontz, that means a lot. And especially as someone who needs that validation, that goes, wow, you actually think my book belongs up there on the shelf next to theirs. That means a lot. Whereas a smaller publisher can take risks on ones that maybe wouldn't get that yes from the agent, maybe wouldn't get that yes from a big publisher, because they aren't putting a lot of money of their own out beforehand. And if the only people who buy it are their friends and family, they've made back their money, they've made back their investment, and they can move on to the next one. They just have to hope maybe a few of them do really well and really have a support base behind them and grow their own readership. And they can maybe be more personable about it and more supportive in a way that maybe a big giant can't or won't.
Yeah.
But I think it really depends each time. And I think each publisher is different, both the big ones and the small ones. But I think each person who's trying to figure out if they have a story to tell, if they have a book they want to publish, they should look into the company, they should look into the publisher, they should look into the agent, and they should think about, what's the timeline I want for my book? What's the audience I want from my book? If I don't have anybody who's supporting me and nobody's going to buy my book right away, am I going to be okay with that? Or am I going to go ahead and hang my writer's hat up and walk away? It's kind of personal that way.
It's the thing. That's the thing about any non-live art, if that makes sense. Writing a book is the same as painting. Most painters will never be famous in their lifetime until they're dead. And then people are like, oh, this is fantastic. And he's dead. There's no more.
All I have to do is die.
Right? So
I'm just thinking of a scene. I don't know if you watched Girls. I know Jen's probably laughing right now, that one of the authors wrote about her boyfriend who killed himself or who died in an accident or something. And everybody's patting the main character on the back saying, you deserve to have someone die on you too. You deserve that. So she'd have something to write about.
Holy cow.
It's terrible, but I love that show. I'm sorry.
It works. I'm sure that we could talk for 6 hours, but I'm not going to do that. We are about to end the interview. If you've watched the show at all, I ended with one question. What have you done one thing today, not for anybody else, but for yourself, and can conclude this interview to make yourself happy?
Coffee. That's the only thing that gets me going in the morning, and it's the only reason that nobody in my house has died today. That I woke up and I had coffee, and I tried to have a little bit of my own space. It didn't happen. There were 3 people climbing on me and going, "Mama!" right in my face. But coffee. I mean, you said not part of the interview. I was drinking the bourbon before the interview, so does this count too? All of my answers are beverages. There we go. Elijah Craig, everyone.
Actually, that's amaretto back there. So
yours is amaretto? Nice.
Yeah, I think it is. Yep.
You don't even know what you have. Amaretto.
I got that one. I got that one for when I do a shot on the show. Then I got some Appleton Estate for when I want the shits, and I've got some Southern Comfort because Southern Comfort is good with nothing.
Jesse, when do you want the shits? What is this you're asking for?
Well, you know, if you eat too much cheese, sometimes it like bungs you up.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Jesse Lewis Show. Go buy Allison's book, Dibs. It's somewhere, Amazon, wherever it is. On that link down there. Talk to her on Facebook. Bye, Allison. I'm going to hit end broadcast.